Good morning. Today I'm reviewing some slides I made on the year 2013, in which I was exploring how the national security strategy was working in Mexico at the time. Now, looking back at them, just going to watch them again and see how accurate I was about the strategy that the Mexican government was adopting at the time in order to combat the elevated crimes, that organized crime activities that were going on back in the days. So here we start with a slide that says, if we're not winning, then we're losing. And that probably is very accurate. We sure were not winning against organized crime back in 2013, and I'm afraid neither are we right now. Here, I just remember a metaphor about the story of the crabs in a bucket on the beach, and that's basically that there was a bunch of crabs in a bucket, and they were all trying to get out of the bucket, but once a crab went on top of other crabs in order to reach out of the bucket, another crab will just pull him back in. So in that sense, at the time, back in 2013, the Mexican establishment was the equivalent of the fisherman's bucket, in which it was composed of red crabs, which could be defined as the older party in Mexico called PRI, the blue crabs that were at the moment in just losing regaining government over there, and the yellow crabs, which were the PRD party, right? Here we had the red crabs, PRI. Here you had the blue crabs, and then you had the yellow crabs that were the PRD because of the colors of the political parties at the time. Mexico was a young democracy in the making that had only had 12 years of recent democracy, in which we had such events as the 1968 student oppression that was the time of the pre-governing Mexico, 1988 question elections, and the 1994 believable presidential debate between three candidates, in which Presidente Cedillo barely won the election. And of course, in the year 2000, the PRI party was defeated after governing Mexico for 70 years. And here we have the fact that after the year 2000, Mexico, with the help of the blue crabs over there, that seemed to be escaping the bucket for the first time, we had signed in 1994 the NAFTA agreement between Mexico and the United States, which changed the political environment in Mexico a lot. And by the year 2000, President Fox was elected. For the first time, he defeated the PRI party. Afterwards, Felipe Calderón from the same party, from the PAN party, defeated again the PRI party for 6 years. Well, 6 years later, after Vicente Fox. And now I was thinking that the cartels were at the moment a clear and present danger. At the time, President Bush and President Calderón had signed the Plan Merida, and the violence in Mexico had exploded to 60,000 dead. There was a very clear cartel insurgency in the country, and there was a Medusa effect in which you eliminated a cell, a criminal cell, and another one popped up just immediately after you beheaded that. Any criminal organization, another one took its place immediately. Well, here's a little bit about the Plan Media. Now, at the time, there was a war within Mexico, and what was at stake? We had to make the following questions. What does a victory over the cartels look like? What are the criminal groups that must be confronted by the authorities? There was a problem in stability vis democratization of the country. Should the USA favor stability of the country at all costs, even if that means sacrificing democracy? Was it a time for a new strategy? Is the Mexican leadership stuck in a short war strategy state of mind? And I think after all these years, probably there's still no answer to the question of what does a victory over the cartels look like. I don't think the Mexican government has it defined still. At the time, President Calderon seemed to be combating every criminal group in Mexico, but it just didn't seem to be confronting the cartel of Sinaloa, and that could be explained afterwards. The non-protection that Garcia Luna, the security czar in Mexico, seemed to be protecting the cartel of Sinaloa, and probably was under paycheck. Mexico war against organized crime, PAN electoral defeat, effect of electoral defeat shift in strategy. What I was trying to explain here is that after the defeat of Felipe Calderón's PAN party in the elections, and after Peña Nieto came into power, the United States needed to reframe their assumptions about Mexico. What were the strategic impediments to their policy, and how come it wasn't working? Does the strategy need changing? What resources are needed if there's change of strategy? And what don't we know? And probably something that was very clearly happening at the moment was that there was a very large money laundering operation of cartel money being laundered by HSBC Bank at the time. There were also a lot of governors that were probably not working for the citizens, but were rather employees of the cartels. And to list some of the problems at the time was that politicians were pursuing their own ambitions and were not very concerned about national security at the time. There was also an inadequate military strategy to halt the violence in Mexico, even though there were thousands of people that were dying at the time. The military seemed very disconnected from the general public, and there was disheartening violence that was reaching its threshold. At the time, I thought that there couldn't be more violence in Mexico than what was happening in 2013, but now looking back, violence is still growing currently during the López Obrador administration. What were the 6 major trends at the time? The current national security strategy was not working. The government of Mexico was unable to produce tangible results in the eyes of the people. Mexico's security forces remained weak and ineffective because it paid off to be weak and ineffective. The political conflict was increasing at the time. The rule of law was completely lacking of justice, and there was the growing problem of the niche phenomenon, people that didn't work nor did study, especially young people, which was becoming a ticking time bomb for the future of Mexico. So what was proposed at the time? That there was needed a coin strategy was needed, a counterinsurgency strategy that focused on securing the people. You had to ask yourself during the Peña Nieto administration, was the PRI party pursuing a hegemonic agenda? Can the USA influence Mexico leaders to make decisions in the interest of Mexico, or is the political establishment bound to carry out sectarian agendas? What is the relationship between the US military support level and security? If Mexico doesn't have the capability to handle the security situation by themselves, can the United States create a bridge to a more sustainable situation over time? What were the strategic assumptions outlined upon which the Mexican effort should now rest? America's core objectives and interests, and how to strike a delicate balance between Mexican authority and American presence in northern states. Key terrain insurgent troops, win the people and secure the people. What I was basically trying to explain over there in this slide was that Mexico needed an implementation of a counterinsurgency strategy, very similar to with the likes of which the United States applied in countries like Afghanistan or Iraq. What is the relationship between the USA military support level and security, and what factors come into play that the United States had not put in consideration? And one of those probably is that very simple things, such as the fact that a lot of thousands of vehicles in Mexico just transit through the whole Mexico with dummy license plates, or just with without any license plates, contributes to the violence, the overall violence, and the lack of authority, the lack of law in the country. Simple things like that. Another thing to observe is the current situation at the time in 2013 of police weaknesses. There was a lack of accountability and no ownership of the problem, and no milestones for combating the violence. There was a lack of transparency. There were to this time the civil watchdogs are and profits or non-profits organizations are only simulated organizations. Discretional rule of order. Well, yes, everyone overspewed, but I just saw you today at it. Discretional rule of order used by the police, that you can be stopped for speeding your car, and at the time that the policeman just stops you, there will be 5 or 6 cars that will be overspeeding, that it will just crossing just the side of where you are being detained at the time, and police only uses the law against you, but doesn't even bother to care about if other people are committing infractions. The lack of equipment, of modern equipment to combat crime and violence in Mexico. There was no, at the time in 2013, there were no dashboard cameras in most of the cars in major cities in the northern of Mexico. There to this day, there's no wearable cameras like Axons, video, vidmics in key terrains used by police. There's police corporations don't even acknowledge the existence of wearable police cameras. There's no infrared or special investigation technologies used by police. some police corporations to this day don't even have drones. Drug traffic is not a police jurisdiction, which what at the time was transitioning. Only drug consumption. Corruption in acquisition of equipment in conjunction with the so-called civil councils of public security, making the war on drugs a sales opportunity for whatever my pal sells. Bullets used, helicopters, vests, radios, expensive cameras, guns with no visions of operational needs. Well, basically the police corporations effectivity was stalled because of corruption. They didn't think of the acquisition of police equipment in having in mind the best interest of the operational necessities of the corporations, but rather it was the fact of making business and gaining a little bit of money by acquiring certain equipment that of people that will give some money to the people in charge of acquiring the equipment. No public relations with the public, the so-called neighborhood cop figure everyone knows or else reports, and if the succeeds works unilateral communication, no questions asked. There was no real public relations between the police corporations and its citizens. There's no national anti-violence campaign with a national recognizable figure like in the United States, the use of Detective McGrath that reduces cost of pamphlets, radio, and TV ads, and unifies strategy in issues like bullying, gangs, saying no to drugs, kidnaps, alcohol and driving, vigilant neighbors, etc. And we needed a hero figure. And to this day, there is no unification of a public relations strategy in Mexico, no recognizable figure of anti-violence campaign. There is no access to DMV databases under argument that they will be used by the same policemen to kidnaps or robberies. So not all police cars have access to computers in their cars in order to access the information of the people of the cars they stop, about the drivers of the cars they stop. Now, as for the military weaknesses back in 2013, as the military was very well, and until this day is very disconnected from the general public. Bases are impenetrable for civilians, except for occasional military service ceremonies. The youth is disconnected from armed forces. Only recently have there been efforts in order to change this. No decentralized public relations, one voice only from federal or state chain of command, no real budgets in this sense for a public relations strategy. No effort to win the youth through military demonstrations, flight shows, or motorized vehicles demonstrations in colleges. No hero attitude, but broadized goons mentality. There's no binational joint forces demonstrations that I know of, at least probably maybe in the capital city, but not in the rest of the country, like Thunderbirds or Blue Angels that maybe could do a flight show in Mexico in some parts of the. Well, for example, here where I live, I live in the border between Mexico and the United States, and only a distance of a half an hour drive, you can see the Blue Angels, and from the Navy, etc. Is mixed air shows out of the question. Now, strict change of command reflects in soldiers' apparent poor judgment when in contact with civilians, no mind of their own. No Top Gun, no pattern, no ace attitude, no young soldiers from middle class who understand the fight, what is stand and are proud to join the effort. there's a very strict chain of command in the Mexican military. Now the Nini youth, the youth that don't work and don't study, are left out of military service completely. There's no military reserves to be called on for a higher mission. There's no patriotism but opportunism. Great potential for using youth for real positive impact, but a lack of vision by political and military leaders creates a comfort zone in being a respected force because of citizens' poor knowledge of the units and fear of their abuse of power. So the Mexican military is more respected because it is very disconnected from the Mexican public. There's no real watchdogs that supervise what the military does. So the Mexican citizens just seem to think of it in a very romantic way of the Mexican military without the real knowledge of how it operates in the everyday, right? Now, in this slide, it's like, what's wrong with this picture? And it reminded me of the GI Joe Cobra, right? You have here like the military covering their faces, and that can't be really good for a democracy in a country where you have the military covering their faces, and if they abuse of the rights of any citizen, you don't actually even know the face of the person that hurt you, right? And here we have a problem perception, equally important as the actual fight against the organized crime. You have to create a new image for the military and for the police in Mexico, in which the police and military really become heroes. At the time, I think that I don't think that Garcia Luna paid for making a TV program like the NCIS. I don't remember the name of the program in the United States, but they tried to make like the military, Marines seem like heroes. But it was only one program for all Mexico. There wasn't like a real good campaign of making sure that there was a different perception of the security forces in Mexico. These was just some suggestions that military needs to protect the people, knock on neighborhood doors by presenting themselves unarmed, just like in a counterinsurgency strategy. Military posts needed to be on main streets, shoulders must be polite and need to create rapport with citizens. The non-working, non-studying youth should be incorporated to unarmed reserves, should be trained to be the youthful side of the military and community watchdogs, low risk and ground intelligence on the terrain. Key terrain must be reinforced, not by patrols destined to bases, but directly stationed with as much community interaction as possible. Protect key tourism areas, terrains, close to hotels and clubs. Social interaction and presence must be, military intelligence should focus on making sure police do their jobs, and United States efforts should focus on making sure the military in Mexico isn't infiltrated, which it probably is. Here we have seemed like a campaign from the military that said 2 hours in the company of a soldier, but armed forces facing the nation and humanizing our forces. That's what we needed and what we still need. Police in key terrorist posts should carry wearable cameras such as Axons or V-views, etc. on control posts. They should be supervised by the Mexican Navy and the military intelligence, who should operate independently, one branch openly supervising police and another covertly watching both. Federal security forces should operate covertly inside nightclubs and casinos unarmed, supervising inspectors' entries of minors and bathroom drug consumption within the installations and should be able to act on the spot in the case of low, medium risk situations of drug distribution going on over there. They should be supervised covertly by Navy and Army intelligence, rotating branches, or be helped by helpful watchdogs. More arrests in already. Here we were talking about the penitentiaries in Mexico. It says more arrests in already overpopulated state jails, school of crime as a result of the new jurisdiction over organized crime fight to states. Will addicts get access to drugs inside state penitentiaries? Who will provide them? How do they get there? Who supplies the drugs? Who benefits? Will authorities be tempted to supply them or manage the internal consumption? Will the inmates' numbers skyrocket with new laws? First fumigate inside of the house, then garden, not the other way around. State and municipal police interpret new jurisdiction in fighting the street supplier and addicts, not organized crime. Increase arrest mentality, not strategic intelligence plan. So there was a mentality over there at the time in 2013 that you needed to criminalize the consumption of drugs instead of really fighting the cartels. New state jurisdiction does not come hand to hand with federal resources to support it. If no interest, for there is no money to be made. It's of no interest for the authorities if there was no money to be made, right? And here we have the front door is secured. How about the windows? There seems like at the same time that the Mexican government was fighting a war against organized crime and cartels, it seemed to open other doors all the windows of the house were completely open to organized crime. By the house, I mean the country, right? You had banks that laundered the money of billions of dollars of criminal money being laundered. You had political parties that were abusing their tax exemption status in order to promote that promoters of major entertainment events such as concerts could evade paying taxes, and therefore the lack of supervision over these events could promote the money laundering of black money, and also could be a perfect conduct for black money making its way into the finances of these political parties. So you had by one side a bank laundering the money of the cartels, and by the other side you had the political establishment creating mechanisms for laundered money and black money making its way into political campaigns all over Mexico. The lack of accountability via the Merida support. Only 50% of the police have been tested for trust conditions, support to Mexican milestones achievements. Official conscience. Here we have there was a need at the time for creating watchdog capacity, real community oversight of results. We need USA Mexicans to start raising questions through internet to Mexican transparency agencies and asking for answers on public media, communication, film industry, TV, radio, internet ads, or movie theaters, oversight of operations by a council with the National Security Council representability of a Congress in which the U.S. has its seat as a result of Merida Aid Agreement, international certification of key financial, IT, and operational audit organizations in North Mexico. There are no private school graduates in government, etc. So of these slides, we can basically just say that can basically say that things haven't really changed a lot. The violence in Mexico has exploded. Political parties continue to be infiltrated by the cartels. So their Mexico states, different states, seems to be controlled by organized crime in Mexico. The penitentiaries in Mexico still seem to be operated by, in many instances, by cartels, because there's a lot of drug consumption happening inside these state penitentiaries, and you have to ask the question of who provides the drugs, how do they get inside the penitentiaries, and who is benefiting economically of it. And you still have the general perception of the population that the police forces and military are very disconnected from the general population. And of course you have the problem of the ninis, people who do not work and do not study, do not go to school. But I believe that's the only thing that the Lopez Obrador administration has been fighting in a good way. That I've been focusing on their efforts on making sure that this community of young citizens of Mexico have opportunities at least to stay away from crime organizations and to not be absorbed within the operations of the cartels. But in general, in Mexico, there's more violence than there was back in 2013. There's more concentration of power. There's only one political party right now, which is the Lopez Obrador party, which is completely different from the parties that were governing Mexico back in 2013. That's now taking control of almost the majority of states in Mexico. And you still have the problem very much of police corporations not being equipped with the correct equipment to combat crime, not only to combat conventional crime, but to have control over their territories and fight their control of the territories against the cartels. There's many technologies, like for example, that should be used at least in all northern Mexico or in all of Mexico, like persistent aerial surveillance systems, which can monitor from a spy plane flying on the sky 90 kilometers of a whole city, just like if you were watching it on a satellite. And that might help a lot to prevent crimes in Mexico. But authorities just seem to deny that the existence of these technologies exist, and they just don't even consider them acquiring or renting them. We're talking, for example, aerial persistent surveillance systems. And we're talking, another example is body cameras for police. They were talking like body cameras like Axons and other, like for example Video, etc. There's a lot of brands, right, that could help to reduce the corruption in police forces and make more efficient the operations of the police forces. And well, that's all for today. I was just taking a look at those old slides from 2013. Of course, democracy in Mexico is still very young, and it has a lot of problems, but the balance is just out of this world in Mexico right now. It's just, I don't know, it seems like it's very disheartening that currently the population seems to got accustomed to the fact of living in this state of violence that can get worse. Of course, it can get just like it was back in Colombia in the times of Pablo Escobar. And I hope we don't get over there, right? There's been a lot of instances of narco-tourism in Mexico, but still not to the to those levels of Pablo Escobar exploding, making putting bombs in commercial planes, or using a lot of car bombs all over Colombia, right? We still don't have that kind of violence in Mexico, but we're getting closer, and that's very disheartening. Well, thank you all for having a look at these slides. Just was just doing it for fun, really. That's all. Have a good day. Thank you for watching.